Hello, my name is Anthony Tran. Welcome back to the Unknown Military History Podcast. This episode follows the immediate aftermath of the partition of Babylon, describing the Lamian War, a major Greek rebellion which made its mark on Hellenic history. Without further ado, let us return to the ancient world as tensions are brewing and spilling over Alexander's death. The aftermath of the partition of Babylon had left Alexander's longtime companion Perdiccas as the sole regent over the empire. A number of Alexander's many other comrades became satraps or governors of the various provinces. Meanwhile, Alexander's wife Roxanne had given birth to a son named Alexander IV. A near civil war had been stamped out by the new regent Perdiccas, and it seemed like the empire would be at peace. However, peace was not to last. Antipater had been the longtime regent and governor of the Greek mainland, which included Macedon. During Alexander's Persian campaigns, he had kept the Greek city-states under Macedon's authority from rebelling. Antipater had crushed several rebellions. Now, as the death of Alexander caused a power vacuum, he was able to retain his position of power. However, as we mentioned at the end of the previous episode, Antipater's hold on Greece would be shaken in what would be known as the Lamian War or the Hellenic War. To understand what happened next, we must first go back little more than a decade prior to Alexander's death. Alexander had assumed the leadership of the Hellenic League, a unification of Greeks created by his father Philip after the Battle of Chaeronea. This was meant to unify the Greeks to provide the means of conquest in Persia. However, not all of the Greek city-states were happy at being under the Macedonian boot. One of the cities that hated Macedon was Athens, the first vestige of democracy. Athens had long led an insurrection against Macedon, most notably under the famed orator Demosthenes. Demosthenes openly spoke out and opposed both Philip and his son Alexander. However, due to Alexander's great power, Athens never had a chance to formally revolt. Let us now come back to the present. Alexander is dead. His empire is struggling with the means of succession. This was a perfect opportunity for Athens to revolt. It was thus that in this uncertain time, the officials and nobles of Athens met in the Ecclesia. The Ecclesia was the assembly for all Athenians, where they would call meetings and vote. In the Ecclesia, Demades and Phocion, two prominent statesmen, opposed rebelling against Macedon. However, the majority voted otherwise. For years, they had surrendered their people and their resources to Alexander's relentless campaign in the east. The Athenians were tired. They were determined to declare war against Macedon and rise up against Antipater. The Athenians would seize 50 talents from Harpalus, the late Alexander's cunning treasurer who had fled to Athens because of his shady financial dealings. The talents would be used to pay for a large number of mercenaries. Athenian forces would thus fall under the command of a certain commander named Leosthenes. The Athenians were also joined by the Aetolians, the people of another Greek city-state called Aetolia, which resented Antipater's rule. In total, the rebels had around 25,000 strong under the command of Leosthenes. Leosthenes quickly struck the Macedonians first. At Plataea, he defeated an army of Boeotians that were allied with Macedon, forcing them to retreat. Meanwhile, Antipater was scrambling to assemble Macedonian troops. He was left with little, however, as most of them were stationed in Asia. Thus, he only set out with 13,000 troops and 110 ships, alongside a number of Thessalian cavalry. Antipater then confronted the rebels at Thermopylae, where the Spartans famously resisted against the Persians a century ago. However, during the ensuing battle, Antipater's Thessalian allies defected to the rebel side, defeating Antipater with losses. Leosthenes had defeated the regent in battle. Now Antipater fled, with Leosthenes and the rebels right on his back in pursuit. Antipater found refuge in the fortified city of Lamia. Leosthenes and his rebels set up camp and besieged Antipater, and whatever was left of the Macedonian forces. However, the siege of Lamia proved to be a much more difficult task than the rebels expected. The well-walled town proved to be the most impregnable, as countless assaults were halted with heavy losses. There were also constant sorties ordered by Antipater to weaken the rebel siege. One day, as Leosthenes was overseeing the ditch digging during the siege, one of these Macedonian sorties occurred. Leosthenes was one among many rebels, and when the Macedonians attacked, he was caught unaware. As they fought to the last, Leosthenes was cut down by Macedonian blades. The general who had led the rebel cause and delivered victories for it was now dead. Demoralized, the Athenian rebels and their allies retreated. Macedonian reinforcements from Asia, though, would soon arrive following the Athenian defeat at Lamia under the command of a general named Leonidas. Meanwhile, around that time, the Macedonian navy under Cleitus the White, one of Alexander's officers, defeated an Athenian naval force at the Battle of Amorgus. Finally, the de facto ruler of the Greek mainland, Antipater, combined his forces with the Macedonian reinforcements. Together, they met a coalition of city-states, which included Athens, Thessaly, and the Aetolian League at the Battle of Cranon. The battle initially began as a clash between both sides' cavalry forces. In the meantime, Antipater ordered his Macedonian infantry to charge the enemy line, overwhelming the smaller number of Greeks. When the Athenian cavalry saw their allied infantry retreating, they fled the battle. The aftermath of the Battle of Cranon, the Greek city-states under Athens were forced to make concessions in several treaties. Athens was forced to dissolve its ancient democratic system and replace it with a plutocracy, which meant that only the wealthiest citizens could have a say in government affairs. The rest of the citizenry were effectively exiled. Antipater, whose position as regent of the Greek mainland was now safe, installed Macedonian garrisons in the rebellious cities and purged many democratic influencers. Many of those Greeks who stood against Macedon from the reign of Alexander's father Philip suffered terrible fates. Most notably, the renowned orator Demosthenes, who had stood against Philip and Alexander and who had organized this rebellion, was forced to commit suicide. Though the Lamian War would quickly be overshadowed by the future wars of succession, which would occur a nanosecond later, its impact was felt by sympathetic historians. For example, the English historian George Grote stated that this war marked the end of a, quote, autonomous Hellenic world, and it ended free speech in Greece. To him, the war was a, quote, glorious effort for the recovery of Grecian liberty undertaken under circumstances which promised a fair chance of success, end quote. Thank you for listening to this episode of Unknown Military History, and I will see you all in the next one.